In an age where land represents both authority and a contested resource, few leaders have dared to dismantle the centuries-old systems that keep citizens disconnected from their own soil. Yet in Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré is leading one of the most ambitious land reforms in modern African history, a nationwide initiative offering free land to farmers, laborers, and families long denied ownership. This isn't just a policy, it is a direct challenge to historical injustice, a redefinition of national autonomy, and a testament to Traoré's strategic clarity and determination. Africa has always been more than a physical space. It embodies memory, heritage, and endurance. For generations, colonial-era agreements, foreign influence, and domestic misgovernance have bound African land in intangible chains. Burkina Faso, culturally rich yet historically exploited, was no exception. Even post-independence, large areas of fertile land remained under elite control, in the hands of multinational corporations, or buried in bureaucratic deadlock. For many rural communities, owning productive land was a hope continually deferred by poverty and unfulfilled political promises that began to change with Traoré. When he assumed leadership, he didn't inherit a clean slate. He took on a nation whose soil had absorbed both the labor and the disillusionment of its people. But unlike those before him, he refused to act merely as a caretaker. He chose to be a cultivator, to break new ground, uproot outdated systems, and plant the seeds of a future unchained from foreign dependency. At the heart of his agenda lies a bold yet simple principle: return land to the people. However, this apparent simplicity is underpinned by detailed strategy, technical insight, and strong governance. Traoré understood that access to land alone isn't enough. Land without structure leads to disorder. To address this, he ordered a national audit of land ownership using satellite imaging, geospatial artificial intelligence, and partnerships with local leaders to locate idle, misused, or illegally held lands. What many predicted would take years, his team accomplished in mere months. A second key move was the introduction of a publicly accessible digital land registry. For the first time in Burkina Faso's history, citizens could view available lands, track ownership, and follow transparent claim processes. Secrecy gave way to openness. Confidence in the system began to grow. Traditional red tape, once a haven for bribery and favoritism, was cut through with blockchain verification and biometric identity systems. The message was unmistakable. This land belongs to the people, not to paperwork. But Traoré didn't stop at redistribution. He recognized that land alone couldn't guarantee survival. Alongside each land title, beneficiaries received starter packages, tools, drought-resistant seeds, technical training, and support through local cooperatives. It wasn't a gift, it was a pathway to independence, where previous governments had overpromised and underdelivered. Traoré acted quietly, but effectively. International observers voiced concern. Financial institutions warned of disruption to property markets, but Traoré remained unmoved. In a defining speech, he said, "Let them worry about markets. Worry about the mothers who farm barefoot. Worry about youth with strong hands. But no land. This isn't charity, it's justice." With that declaration, he redefined what leadership in Africa could mean. Under Traoré, land reform became not a bureaucratic policy, but a form of emancipation. The outcomes were immediate and significant. In less than a year, over 700,000 hectares were redistributed, directly benefiting nearly 1.5 million people. Previously deserted fields began to flourish. Food security improved. The first time in 10 years, youth migration to cities declined. Rural employment increased, not through temporary programs, but through meaningful ownership and restored dignity. The global community looked on with surprise. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as unstable, had achieved what wealthier nations had only theorized, using land not as a weapon, but as a tool for transformation. What distinguishes Traoré's leadership is not just the policy itself, but the philosophy behind it. He understands that land given freely is not a loss, it's a long-term investment. When people own their land, they protect it. When families plant roots in their own soil, they build a future. And when a country restores its bond with the land, it regains control over its destiny. Leading such change takes more than courage. It requires vision, cultural understanding, and emotional intelligence. Traoré embodies all three. While others have tried to maintain control by withholding land, he has reversed the model, returning land to the people so they can govern their own lives. In doing so, he has not only transformed a nation, but redefined the very logic of leadership. Oligarchs, foreign interests, and internal skepticism have all shaped post-colonial societies, but President Ibrahim Traoré has taken a different path. He has reminded the people of Burkina Faso that sovereignty doesn't begin in parliament or the palace, but in the land beneath their feet. In the next segment of this commentary, we'll explore how this reform is not only changing agriculture, but also reshaping gender roles, community dynamics, interethnic collaboration across Burkina Faso. Because when land is distributed fairly, it doesn't just grow crops, it grows justice. One of the most impactful, yet often overlooked aspects of President Ibrahim Traoré's free land distribution program is its effect on Burkina Faso's social fabric, particularly for women, ethnic minorities, and rural communities. Historically left out of decision-making processes, while many leaders talk about empowerment as a vague idea, Traoré has made it practical by linking it directly to land, giving people the dignity they had long been denied. In traditional Burkina society, land inheritance has typically followed patriarchal customs. Women were expected to work the land but were rarely granted legal ownership. This long-standing imbalance created economic dependence, limited women's choices, and left many vulnerably, especially after divorce, widowhood, or male migration. Traoré's policy directly addresses this injustice. This program requires that at least 40% of redistributed land go to women single, married, or widowed listed as official title holders. It's not as dependents of husbands or fathers. In community after community, women who once worked the land without recognition now stand as property owners, cooperative leaders, and planners. From the dry savannas of Yanga to the fertile fields of Cascades, these women are changing centuries of exclusion in just one planting season, but the support goes beyond ownership. Traoré's government also provides legal services, mobile clinics, help with documentation, and workshops on land rights, all available in local languages and often led by female paralegals and respected elders. This isn't just policy, it's empowerment. The ripple effects have been far-reaching. In provinces where women control farmland, rates of domestic violence have declined, families are eating better, and school attendance for girls has increased. Because when a mother owns land, she gains not just a resource, but influence. In markets once reliant on imported food and male-dominated trade routes, women's cooperatives are now selling directly to towns and cities, cutting out middlemen, and reinvesting profits into health centers, literacy programs, and grain reserves. This transformation isn't limited to gender. In a nation as ethnically diverse as Burkina Faso, home to Masi, Fulani, Bisa, Gormanch, and others, land has often been a point of identity and friction. Traoré's reform promotes inclusion rather than competition. Local land committees include representatives from all major ethnic groups, preventing any one group from dominating the process. In areas where land disputes were once common, shared land trusts have been introduced, run through rotating leadership, a traditional practice now codified in national law. This blend of heritage and modern policy is one of Traoré's most underappreciated successes. Rather than forcing a top-down bureaucratic model, his administration listened to griots, village elders, spiritual leaders, and youth groups who helped shape land policies rooted in both fairness and tradition. As a result, the program isn't just accepted, it's defended. In some districts, communities have even returned excess land voluntarily, offering it to families displaced by conflict in the Sahel. This kind of solidarity is re-rand intentional. It stems from leadership that believes in people, listens to them, and trusts them to work together. Some critics ask whether this idealistic model can scale, but that question misses the point. This isn't a rigid, centralized system built on numbers. It's a grassroots movement growing through replication. Every village that joins strengthens it. Every successful cooperative inspires another. Every woman who plants on her own land signals that the old way is no longer the only way. That's how real change takes root, not just through government, authority, but through people believing in their own potential. Perhaps most remarkably, the program has had a stabilizing effect in areas once plagued by communal conflict over grazing land and scarce resources. With official land titles, disputes have eased. Armed conflicts over territory have declined. Elders who once settled land disputes now organize harvest celebrations. Young people once vulnerable to recruitment by armed groups are staying home, planting crops, and planning futures. They are no longer just citizens. They are caretakers. By giving them land, Traoré has given them a reason to remain, a reason to dream, and a reason to fight not against one another, but for their land. In this way, land reform has become more than economic policies, a form of national healing. A country worn down by exploitation, drought, and instability is beginning to recover through the same soil that once bore its burdens. Through all this, Ibrahim Traoré has remained grounded, not seeking applause or turning progress into personal gain. He reminds the nation that this isn't a miracle from above, but a movement from within. His brilliance lies not in complexity but in clarity. His strength is not in control but in example. With each hectare returned, each woman empowered, each community connected across cultural lines, Burkina Faso takes another step toward a sovereignty not defined by GDP or foreign investment, but by the pride of its people and the resilience of its land, as land returns to its rightful stewards. Prosperity follows slowly at first, then faster than anyone, including early supporters, expected. Under Ibrahim Traoré, the free land distribution program has not only sparked a social transformation, it has awakened an economy grounded in fairness, productivity, and homegrown solutions. The genius of Traoré's strategy is in seeing land not as a static asset, but as a living foundation for national independence. Agriculture was no longer viewed as mere subsistence, but recognized as a viable and scalable industry. By granting families permanent rights to their land, Traoré unlocked both emotional and economic incentives that had been dormant for generations. When people own the land they work, they don't just think in seasons, they plan for decades. They invest, prepare for the future, pass on knowledge to their children, and most importantly, they innovate across the rural stretch from Boulay, Damuhong, to Senta. Newly empowered farmers, many owning land for the first time, have adopted crop diversification, organic soil techniques, and water-saving systems. These were previously out of reach under exploitative tenancy. Agreements. Traoré's administration has supported this rising ambition with targeted initiatives. Fertilizer subsidies distributed through mobile vouchers, expanded rural roads linking production areas to national markets, and low-interest loans issued by cooperative-run microbanks. These programs intentionally bypass the corrupt intermediaries who once diverted public resources for personal gain. One of the most effective economic strategies has been the development of decentralized agricultural hubs. Designed as integrated systems, these hubs bring together farmers, traders, agricultural experts, and students to work side by side, often located in previously overlooked areas. They provide shared tools, processing machines, grain storage, seed testing facilities, and even solar-powered irrigation systems. Previously, such infrastructure was limited to major cities or tied to donor-funded projects with external conditions. Under Traoré, however, these hubs are owned by communities and supported by the state, ensuring that economic value stays where it's created. This isn't trickle-down economics, it's a ground-up model. Within just 18 months of the program's rollout, domestic food output rose by 27%, significantly reducing Burkina Faso's dependence on imports of key staples like maize, sorghum, and millet. The country's food trade dynamics began to shift. Small-scale farmers moved beyond merely feeding their families. they became active players in national food security. In rural markets that once relied on heavily subsidized foreign grains, Burkina, farmers now set the prices, lifting entire communities out of poverty in the process, and the reform extended beyond basic farming. Traoré's administration helped launch agro-processing cooperatives that now produce a range of goods from dried mangoes for export to fortified flours and essential oils. In regions like Codpins, women-led businesses are producing she-based cosmetics branded locally with aspirations to compete internationally. These ventures strengthen domestic supply chains while tapping into global markets. Following presidential directives, the Ministry of Commerce eliminated excessive licensing requirements and funded trade training centers. These centers guide rural entrepreneurs through the logistics of exports, packaging standards, and digital marketing tools. Traoré's vision here is deeply strategic. Land ownership is foundational, but it must lead to active participation in the economy. Production without distribution has little impact, and value must be retained, not extracted. By giving local communities control over logistics, processing, and branding, his administration has disrupted the old colonial cycle where Africa grew raw materials only to buy them back refined. The data backs this up. Rural ... Employment has increased by over 30% in major regions, while enrollment in agricultural vocational schools among youth has doubled. This shows that young people no longer see farming as a fallback option, but as a respectable and viable career path. At the national level, Burkina Faso's GDP has not only stabilized, it has also shown signs of growth, perhaps. Even more notable is how inflation on basic food items, an issue that has severely impacted many African countries amid global disruptions, has remained relatively under control in Burkina Faso. This stability stems from confidence in local food production. Critics once argued that free land distribution would disrupt market dynamics, yet the opposite has proven true. With secure land ownership and consistent yields, small-scale farmers are now seen as reliable borrowers. Local banks, some of which were once on the verge of collapse due to high-risk urban loans, now report repayment rates above 90% from rural borrowers who use their harvests as collateral. A landowner with a reliable crop is a lender's ideal client. Traoré recognized this before many economists did. International investors, who were initially cautious, concerned about ideological risks, are now actively pursuing partnerships, not with government agencies, but directly with farmer cooperatives. This shift reflects growing trust in decentralized development. Despite these gains, the president has avoided taking a self-congratulatory stance. He regularly reminds citizens that economic resilience is not a final goal, but a daily practice, built on effort, integrity, and shared commitment. His strategy is not about offering miracle fixes, but about restoring the principles lost during colonial rule, that those who till the land should benefit from it, and that progress should never compromise sovereignty. Traoré's economic approach is subtle yet bold. Where others chase GDP metrics to appeal to international donors, he prioritizes food access, rural pride, and long-term independence. While some rely heavily on foreign consultants, he listens to farmers, women's groups, and youth leaders. This is not simply development, it is economic liberation, and it is proving effective for the first time in generations. Burkina farmers are not just enduring the system, they are shaping it. They are no longer trapped by debt or exploitation, but are instead building storage facilities, installing irrigation systems, and creating cooperative regulations. They're not waiting for external help. They're taking charge of a future defined by both abundance and sovereignty. All of this progress stems from one leader's choice to view land, not as a commodity, but as a right, and to see agriculture not as a hardship, but as a pathway. Through this vision, Ibrahim Traoré has reminded both Africa and the wider world that true leadership is not about copying foreign models, but about rekindling local strength in the broader narrative of Africa's journey. Traoré's land reform stands as more than a national achievement. It serves as a political statement, a firm rejection of the era of quiet compliance and conditional sovereignty. What Traoré has implemented in Burkina Faso is more than a land redistribution plan. It is a direct challenge to the long-standing logic that kept African land under foreign control and African futures in foreign hands. By returning land to the people freely, unconditionally and unapologetically, he has sent a message that reaches beyond Burkina Faso. It resonates in European capitals, international boardrooms, and diplomatic halls across the continent. It asserts that Africa is capable of governing itself on its own terms. For too long, post-colonial governance has operated like a shell game, declaring freedom while maintaining economic constraints. Land was often sold to elites or foreign corporations. Development was defined not by local well-being or food sovereignty, but by contracts signed in air-conditioned hotels by people disconnected from the land itself. Within that system, to govern well often meant to manage dependency discreetly. Traoré has completely rejected this premise. He has reminded his nation and the continent that real revolution does not stop with a regime change. It continues. In the everyday restoration of dignity, in every village, on every piece of land, and in every said. His reforms are not just policy changes, they are historical corrections, is addressing a legacy of dispossession that began with colonization and was prolonged through structural economic controls. While many African leaders speak with passion but govern through fear, Traoré's strength lies in his strategic thinking, clear communication, and ability to lead through trust. His land initiative, though bold, has been carefully to provoke conflict with the West, but to demonstrate that a different development model is both necessary and viable. In doing so, he has challenged long-standing assumptions that have justified Africa's economic subordination, that Africans are too corrupt to govern themselves, too poor to manage land, too divided to collaborate. These narratives start to unravel the moment one visits a Burkina farming cooperative where women manage plots, youth-led initiatives, and communities negotiate harvests without state control or foreign consultants. This isn't disorder. It's capacity long present, only denied by those who feared its rise. Politically, Traoré's decision to prioritize land reform over high-profile infrastructure or diplomatic spectacle reflects a deep understanding of history. He knows that real revolutions begin quietly growing beneath the surface before becoming visible. Rather than seek legitimacy through international summits or media coverage, he has grounded it in the everyday realities of rural life. His support is not driven by party machines or publicity, but by the food now feeding families, the land titles held in hard-working hands, and the children attending school because the soil now sustains their homes. Globally, this progress is unsettling to some. Traoré has shown that a different path exists. If other African countries follow, if young people demand similar reforms, if land is viewed as a public right instead of a private asset, then the foundations of neo-colonial systems begin to shake. Resource agreements, debt-based diplomacy, sovereignty for security, deals all rely on one condition. Africa must remain unaware of its own power. Traoré has made that power visible. In doing so, he now finds himself at the center of a larger ideological shift, one that echoes the legacies of leaders like Sankara and Nkrumah and Lumumba. But unlike many of his revolutionary predecessors, Traoré operates in a different world when shaped by digital surveillance, data-driven capitalism, and global influence disguised as development assistance. His land reform is not only a national initiative, but also a protective measure resisting creeping privatization and digital extraction by rooting sovereignty in the most tangible of assets, land. Once reclaimed, land becomes a buffer against external interference. If Burkina Faso can grow its own food, fuel its own economy, and finance its own growth, then no external force can control it through embargoes or credit pressure. This is the essence of Traoré's political philosophy. Sovereignty begins with self-reliance. Land program is not a handout. It is a shield, a base, and a firm rejection of forced dependency. Yet perhaps what most distinguishes Traoré's leadership is his refusal to center the movement around himself. His name doesn't appear on land titles. He doesn't brand projects. With his image, he avoids self-glorification and instead credits the people, insisting they are the true drivers of change. In doing so, he models a rare form of leadership, one based not on personal ambition, but on shared empowerment. That humility may prove to be his greatest strength. As Burkina Faso continues its journey through reform, security, and economic rebuilding, the world will keep watching, some with interest, others with concern about what success might signal. But inside the country, a different emotion is taking root: pride. Not the surface-level nationalism of slogans, but a deeper pride, a quiet confidence born from working land they now own and harvesting on their own terms. This pride can't be captured in statistics or reports, but it's real and it's growing. And as it grows, it uplifts not just a country, but an idea that Africa can choose its leaders, design its own systems, and reclaim its land, calmly, wisely, deliberately. In a world entangled in debt and misinformation, Ibrahim Traoré offers something truly disruptive, a sincere alternative. And for that, history may remember him not as a populist or a strongman, but as someone who planted the seeds of a different future, in a time when many leaders talk big but act small. Traoré stands apart, not by promising miracles, but by quietly building, step by step, with purpose. His land reform is more than just policy, is a transformation grounded in justice, reason, and the conviction that the people of Burkina Faso deserve to own their future. It's not lease it. If his story has resonated with you, if you believe in African sovereignty, dignity, and grassroots transformation, then this is only the beginning. Subscribe to the voice of Ibrahim Traoré. Here we don't just share stories, we reveal truth, recognize courage, and elevate the voice of a rising Africa. Thank you for watching and for standing with the soil, the people, and the promise of a better future.